This is Canada Reads American Style, featuring two friends who love Canada Reads and Canadian literature. Welcome our host Rebecca from Michigan and Tara from Ontario. Hi everyone, this is Rebecca. My co-host Tara and I have come up with a new feature for the podcast called Hidden Gems With, in which we ask authors to share their reading recommendations with us. I am excited to kick off our first episode with Sheena Kamal. Welcome, Sheena.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Sheena is an author, essayist, and screenwriter. She wrote the critically acclaimed Nora Watts thriller series, The Lost Ones, It All Falls Down, and No Going Back, as well as a YA novel titled Fight Like a Girl. You've heard us rave about her novels many times on this podcast, and I encourage you to listen to our interview with her on December 6th, 2022. So, Sheena, to get started, on February 16th, you had a post on Bookstagram about supporting authors who write genre fiction. And Tara and I knew immediately we wanted you to be our first author for this series. So, can you talk a little bit about that post and then go ahead and give us your recommendations?
Sure. Yeah. So I made that post because I noticed, well, at the time, and even currently, there is a big orange scare that is trying to absorb Canada. And there has been a real push to support Canadian. And I thought, oh, what a great way to get the word out about Canadian writers, but specifically just highlight the reality that genre writers in Canada don't get a lot of love from the CanLit establishment. And I think that there are some efforts to change that. There's the Motive Festival with the Toronto Festival of Authors that now has they have their Motive, which is the murder mystery part of the festival now. And there are efforts, but still, I guess maybe I'm a little hurt that we don't get to invited to all of the nice parties and to have all of the free hors d'oeuvres and hobnob with it. No, it's really not that. It's just that as a genre writer in Canada, um, what it is that we often have to go to the US or the UK to get our agents, to get our publishers, and that's what I had to do. So I remember The Lost Ones, my first novel, got rejected by every single Canadian editor, but it got picked up in the US by a very well respected editor there. And I thought, well, why don't we support more genre writers here? Why don't we open it up a little bit? It seems like, and I think it is open up some, but at that time it seemed very narrow what Canada was looking for. And we have some great writers here. Some of the, heavy hitters in the crime world are Canadian. Like you look at Louise Penny, you look at Jennifer Hillier, you look at Linwood Barkley, Shara Lapina, like these are really big names, and all of these people go to the US or the UK.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and give us your recommendations then.
Right. So my number one recommendation when people ask me about crime fiction, Canadian crime fiction, is always Sam Wiebe's Wakeland series. And just a little caveat here, Sam is a personal friend of mine, but even if he wasn't, like even if I thought he was a terrible person, and he isn't, but even if I thought that, I would still recommend him widely because I think Sam, he is like, to me, he does the hard-boiled PI stuff better than anyone else in Canada. And he writes the city of Vancouver so very well. And I write Vancouver also, but and not that it's not good or whatever, that's subjective, but the way that Sam does it, he's lived in that city his whole life. He loves it, he hates it, he has all sorts of complicated feelings about it, and it comes through in that series. And so he explores it in such incredible detail. You really get to see what real Vancouver is like when you read his Wakeland series. The last one that I read was Sunset in Jericho. It's phenomenal. And he really flies under the radar here. He's very critically acclaimed. I think he's won the Strand, and he gets nominated for all these like really great awards, but I feel like he doesn't get enough love. And so I'm always sharing the love with Sam because I think that he really deserves it. And he's a fantastic writer.
Yeah, my co-host partner Tara is from Canada. I'm from the US. And it's funny, I don't remember her ever mentioning his name. So maybe he is sort of flying under the radar a little bit for us.
Hmm.
So, what's your next recommendation?
The next one is a book that I blurbed, and it's not a hidden gem because I think it's actually going to have a pretty big release. But just in case, I want to do my part. I don't blurb very often, but this one I thought sounded so intriguing. It's Julie Chan is Dead by Liann Zhang. It's about a supermarket clerk who takes over the identity of her dead influencer twin sister and falls down this rabbit hole of influencer culture. And it reminds me of Bunny by Mona Awad. That book is just crazy. Like, it's just an insane book. And this book has such parallels to it. And every step of the way, it's one of those books where you will not like this person, and that's a criticism that I get from my female leads as well, is that, like, oh, I don't like this, but you probably won't like this character, but she makes all of the most interesting and wrong decisions, and it's really really very, I mean, like, funny is a word for it, but it's more than that. It's sly. It's a sly little book, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was just an imaginative take on influencer culture, let's say.
I love that you use the word sly. That's kind of amazing. And I'm just curious, is that book out already or it's coming out?
I think it's coming out this spring, maybe May, potentially. May or June.
I just want to remind everyone about how much I loved your Nora Watts series. And one of the things I loved about it is Nora is a really gritty character because really, who wants to read about a namby-pamby main character, right?
Right.
That's one of the reasons that I really love that series.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, my take is that if men are allowed to be, you know, dark and unlikable and make the wrong decisions, then why can't women? Like, why do we have to be the little pansies? My goal with Nora was always that people connected with her rather than liked her.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it about Nora. Yeah, I love that. Now, you've given us 2 great recommendations so far. What's next?
I really want to highlight Asma Zahanak Khan. She is a Canadian writer, and she writes both locations in Canada and the US. But one book that really stuck out for me was A Dangerous Crossing. I think it's in the third or the fourth installment of her Katek and Getty series, and it's about the migrant crisis, and it takes place in Greece. I really liked the insider knowledge that was presented in that book. And Asma herself is an international human rights lawyer. So you really feel her expertise in her work. You really, like, that you're in good hands. You're going to get an interesting perspective, a well informed perspective, and also a heartfelt one. Her work is very deeply felt, and she presents crime issues and writes in the crime genre in a way that is incredibly moving and sheds light on issues that are in the news, right? And that we as lay people, we may not understand some of the nitty-gritties of it, but she really gets in there, and yeah, I really love her work, and I love her imagination and where she takes her book. I think she has a new series out right now with a female lead exclusively, or two female leads potentially. I haven't read those yet, but I know the Katak and Getty series, and it's good.
Wow, yeah, that sounds like something many of us will want to read because it is what's going on in the news right now, and to have that humane perspective of the issues, yeah, that's really important. Okay, what's next?
Okay, well, I have two more, and they are wildly different from the my previous recommendations. The first one, well, the next one, let's just say number three, is AJ Devlin's Hammerhead Jed series. It's about it's a like, how do you describe this? It's a mystery wrestling series about a former wrestler who's now a PI, and it's crazy. It's really, really fun. And AJ Devlin, so I blurbed his first book, and then I blinked and he came out with two, like three or four more. And it's he's a really interesting writer, and he's really doing something so different in the Canadian landscape, which is comedic crime. real comedic crime. And his main character is just a riot, and the stories that he comes up with is really interesting. And also, he has a screenwriting background, so all of his stuff is very visual. Like you can visualize it, and yeah, I think we need more funny crime fiction here.
Yeah, also, you have an interesting background in martial arts. So is that partly why you were drawn to his series, maybe?
Yeah, I always love well, I like martial arts, and I do follow, Muay Thai and MMA and stuff. Wrestling, that was a little bit not I want to say my time, it was my time, but it wasn't up my alley at the time because it was so showman-like, right? But I think what AJ Devlin does is he takes that kind of showmanship of this character and he places it in a crime novel, or in his crime series. I think it's really interesting and it's really fun. And one thing I had made a post, this was like, I don't know, last year at some point on TikTok, talking about why there aren't that many men reading anymore, because most readers are women, and most women in publishing, the most people in publishing are women as well. So I think that books like AJ Devlin's book, or series, they they're kind of an avenue potentially to get more men into reading, because it is about martial arts and it is a dude character, and yeah, and they are funny and short books, and I think that they're, if you've got a man in your life who likes reading but doesn't want to like commit to some kind of tome and wants to read for escape and read for pleasure, definitely check out his Hammerhead Jed series.
Yeah, you're right. I follow only probably a handful of men, and a lot of them are reading mostly just classics or yeah, yeah, yeah. Mostly I think classics are definitely they focus on sort of literary fiction, I think. Yeah, so that sounds like a good recommendation too. So, okay, what's next?
So my last recommendation is one that I have just started. So I'm not even finished the book, but I want to talk about it because it's so cool. It's Wayne Ing's Johnny Delivers. And it's set in Toronto in the 1970s, and it's about this young guy who starts delivering weed and egg rolls to save his family from debt. And the main villain is an auntie character, which reminds me of Dial A for Aunties, that Jesse Q. Sutanto novel that made a splash a couple of years ago. It's really funny, and I think that maybe on a personal level, that's the material that I'm more drawn, or I'm increasingly drawn to these days, is not necessarily lighter, but things that have a real sense of humor, things that are potentially easier to get into. I think that we are living in times that are so dark, and sometimes a little escapism in our crime fiction through humor is a good thing, and it's something that I'm more interested in as the days go by. And one thing about this book that I love is that it has chapter titles. And just as a, on a craft level, I just love, like, I think my first, I don't know my first, but I also loved Yinkin Braithwaite's My Sister the Serial Killer, which also has chapter titles. And so when I see them so rarely, whenever I do, I note it, and I think it's such an interesting way um, to structure your chapter around a theme or some kind of idea like this. And anyway, they're funny and they're fun, and yeah, chapter titles make me happy.
Yeah, I agree. I love chapter titles too. That's so fun. Well, those are five fantastic recommendations that you've made. But our bigger question is, are you currently working on anything? And I'm hoping that it will be something we can expect soon.
Right. Okay. So when you, who knows? I'm right now doing a draft for my agent. I'm hoping to send it into her next month. But it is I would say, a lighter and more funnier story than what I'm known for. It is kind of a doppelganger heist story, and it's set in Montreal. So we'll see.
Well, let me ask, is it harder to write something funny and lighter than what you've written in the past?
I think all books are hard to write. So I can't really say. I can only say that at that time I was, my previous work, I could go to the very dark places a lot easier. And right now, I find it harder to access those extremely dark places for myself just as an artist and a person in the world. And what I'm looking for is something that does touch on important issues. And my work tends to be rooted in certain social, potentially environmental issues that I'm pretty interested in. But I'm interested in a lighter touch, and I've been drawn to, and it's just what's come out in the work. So I can't say if it's easier or not, especially especially when I'm doing edits. Those are the worst for me. Um, but it's definitely a new direction that I'm pretty excited about.
Oh, well, we are excited for you and for us because in the future we'll have something else to read from you. And we would love to have you come back and talk about it. So, Sheena, thank you so much for kicking off our new series and giving us some great titles to add to our TBR.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's such an honor to be doing your inaugural episode. Yeah, thank you guys for your support and what you do for the bookish community. Actually, looking at crime writing, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that. And happy reading.
Thank you for joining us on our bookish journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing Canada Reads American Style wherever you listen. You can connect with the podcast and Rebecca on Instagram at Canada Reads American Style and with Tara at On a Branch Reads. Until next time, keep reading.